Mm-hmm. Thank you. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We appreciate you coming and joining us at the disclaimers and learning about proper education compared to what we've all been misled, misguided, and misconfused on. And that's why I always suggest to people, read. Don't sit there and go by these gurus who are sitting there shoving down this stuff that you could, do accept it for value and all this stuff because everybody's going to jail over it. And so when you're shelling out $400 or $500 on these things, hey, why don't you shell that money out to somebody, the groups that are going to actually do something for you? Because these groups always end up having people in jail. And one thing is, at least our group, New Order and Trackers, we walk through the administrative codes, statute codes, and we do reverse it from the judicial point of view with the House and Senate bills, and then we sit there when they have the court cases, what they have won in the court cases. It's like the structure of the Ninth Circuit Court finally came out in January 2018, stated clearly you have to have a warrant to take a child. So, and that is the main thing, is knowing your rights. I mean, I was talking to two women this week that wanted help to get their children back, and I said, okay, this is what we need to do, file the charges, we need to do this direction, and then we need to go after the judge, and we have to go after the public servants that were there. And she goes, well, I don't want to do all that. I don't want to cause a trouble or ruckus. I said, oh, okay. I don't know why you called me, because you just told me you didn't love your child. Oh, no, God's going to handle it. I'm praying to God. God's going to make a miracle happen. Well, good luck. I mean, I've heard that from thousands of people. And unless you file it in court and make it a record, make it become a real structure, because only a man and woman could file an affidavit. District attorney, cop, none of the public employees can file an affidavit, even on your behalf. An affidavit, even on a child's behalf, has to be filed by the parents or by a relative. And that is the one thing that people don't get. Or a neighbor could file for a child, too, for staking the child. But this is the one thing that we know that these administrative rules work. And we've seen them work. We see that some changes are starting to happen. Since Trump's been in office, we've watched a lot of administrative rules that have passed, and the public employees and the Democrats are just yelling and screaming to the world, he can't do this to us. He can't do this to us. Well, we don't want you Democrats in our country. Go back to England. Because all you guys do is rape, rob, and pillage and drain our resources for your own personal gain. And so this is the saddest part that we're living today. This is what's going on in your home today, because you allow this stuff to happen. And when I talk to people and they say they don't want to cause a ruckus or do something like that, it's like, why did they call me to begin with, or why did they call somebody else I know to begin with? Because unless you're willing to stand up and make these men and women liable for their actions. And that includes when they kidnap your child for personal financial gain called human trafficking. And so that's the saddest part. We literally are living today. So I got a few people I'll be bringing in here shortly. And if these people have been filing, one man named Eugene, he does have his case in the federal courts right now. So this is the thing, learning the proper channels to go through. And once you know the proper channels to go through, then you start winning. And that is the point. We want to start winning. And like I said, I just served all the sheriffs a couple weeks ago. They got a few more days to respond, and then I got to start serving the indictments. I'm trying to get the one served on the county commissioners, but I'm still literally fighting my computer, and that's driving me nuts. So, if anybody would, have kindness when they like to donate, let me know. Because I need to get another computer, because people don't realize You know, your satellite images and all this stuff that you put on Facebook and all that, that's public record to be used against you. It's public record to be used against you. And what amazes me, how people don't get it, and then people post stuff up, and then they wonder why something happens or they get in trouble, and it's like they do it to themselves. So you got to realize that these elected and public employees, they are 100 million. What is it? I think it's 1 million of them throughout the country is paid to find ways to go after your home, your assets, and your structure. They have them in each and every county. So just think that you are not, you know, that you think that you're just in a corner. It doesn't work that way. You know, I like to think I'm in a corner too, but, you know, everybody in my area knows me, so if that makes sense. So I do want to bring up these guests here in a minute. We want to get into it. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to get into the Second Amendment. And for the next 27 weeks, or well, after tomorrow night, be 25 weeks, we're going to do each and every amendment. We're going to go through it. We'll explain what's Constitution, what's administrative. And, you know, that's the one thing that you have to be able to file your rights to claim your body. You have to file your rights to own your child. And if you don't sit there and own your property, this is how they get away with coming in and taking your property. Your child is your property. It's their bloodline. The only one that has ownership of that bloodline is you. So that's the one thing. When you allow that birth certificate and that information to go out to the state claims it. The state bar claims it, and the state attorney claims that child. That's how they come in without a warrant. You try to explain this to people. Some people get it, and others just want to argue the point. We're not here to argue. We're not here to waste a life, folks. We're here to solve the issues that are going on. We're here to make sure that we or others don't sit there and keep going on the crazy point. Because there's no point for the children to keep going through the psychological damage that they're done. And like I said, we do recommend a movie called Interstate 60. We recommend everybody watch it twice. It really will explain your court systems. Your court systems are based on religious beliefs. They are not based on Constitution. Religious belief is Article 1 administrative courts. I mean, and people don't get that one. I mean, you know, it's all based on religion. So when you start realizing what the truth is, and a lot of people are waking up to the truth and they're getting it, that's how we're changing the structure, because we are putting out the laws, administrative rules. They don't want their rules out. They try to sit there and tell you, oh, no, that has nothing to do with this, that, and the other thing. Well, believe me, a lot of this stuff, they do have to do with that. So don't get confused by when these people are trying to tell you this, that, and the other thing, you know. And also, too, we could sit there and save you, you know, file this in court, you know, write it off and accept it for value for your bail and all this stuff. You know, there are ways of doing it without that so you don't get caught in a legal situation. And there are men and women who actually go out and put the men and women in these legal situations for financial purposes. Most people know about the Bundy's case, and that's a good example right there. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been involved in that case one way or the other. And so it is interesting when you don't sit there and follow through with your paperwork or follow through to protect the children, your bloodline. And that's the one thing that people need to still continue their education on real Constitution laws, administrative rules, because that is your responsibility for your bloodline. And that's the one thing you've got to pay attention to your bloodline. And I'll talk to a lot of people, well, I don't know how far my bloodline goes back. I don't know if I'm legal or lawful. I've had people that will sit there and say, well, that doesn't matter. I was born on this soil. I have rights. No, you don't. And that's what Trump has made clear. The Supreme Court just made that clear about, 6 weeks ago. So people are waking up to the reality of the Constitution and this treaties that we have that protects the lawful bloodline on this soil. And everybody would always tell you, well, the Indians, it's always the Indians. And no, it's not. That's one of the major lawful bloodlines. But it's not just the Indians that were here too. We have, every other color under the sun has been on this soil for over 500 years. So it's not just one field that the British and the white man that they call, and I'm white too, but I don't like when they sit there and attack the white issue. I want them to attack the issue where it came from. The issue where it came from was England, Spain, and the Vatican, religion. That's what needs to be attacked. That needs to be brought out for the truth of these things. Not sitting there attacking another color or race, because there is no such thing as racism. Racism is a democracy thing, so that way they can make profit to rape, rob, and pillage your children. That's what it really comes down to. And so when you sit there and don't realize how they're doing this to you, and you're allowing this to continually happen, some people would say it's your fault. But then again, when you're not properly educated and you've already been brainwashed, mind-controlled, and then you wake up and you start putting it together, and you realize that mind control is not you. You're not part of mind control. Oh, that's right. Now you come to the realization that you are a man or a woman that is responsible for your actions, so you have to act on it. And that's what has to be done. So that's what the whole point about the education is, getting men and women to comprehend their liability, their responsibility, find out if they're lawful or legal in this country, because it makes a big difference when you go to those administrative courts and file your rights. It makes a big difference when you go to those administrative courts for a traffic ticket or something like that. And so it's knowing, if you have lawful or legal obligations. Most people do not comprehend that there is a structure of lawful and legal. And because the Democrats have gone and pushed this out, it started really in the late 80s, but really started hammering it in the 90s when Clinton came out in the world on this stuff. And don't forget, Clinton made sure, executive order, I don't remember off the top of my head, I'll get it here in a bit, but made everybody human capital, and Clinton was the one who signed the workers' employee side of the Social Security, the Queen of England. So, and the Queen of England does not own Social Security. Social Security is not a private, it's not a government agency. It's a private corporation that only lawful Americans can invest in if you actually read the Social Security administrative rules. But that's the thing, people don't read the rules. They've tried some amendments through the years, but those amendments don't apply to lawful bloodline Americans. They apply to legal citizens. So there's a big difference. Anyhow, we got quite a few. We got a couple gentlemen that I'm going to be bringing on here. They're filing in their court systems. They're bringing up the stuff. They're having their eyes opened up more and more of how it works. And this is the one beauty that when we sit here and talk about these things together and bring everybody on board, and when you bring everybody on board, all of a sudden the ideas start popping out. You start putting more and more pieces of the puzzle together. And you get to know what they can and cannot do even more and more. And so when you write your affidavits, it comes out. And that's the one thing. You always hear people say, well, you need to write a complaint. Okay, you can file a complaint, but you put an affidavit and you write the affidavit in the complaint. You always take their paperwork and alter it for what you need to have done. Because they'll tell you, well, you have to go by my paperwork. This is the law. No, it's not the law. And see, that's the one thing that these men and women try to do to us all the time. Tell us something that ain't real, and they want to convince you it's real when they're the ones that are committing the crimes. So anyhow, I'm going to open up the floor, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Eugene first. He had something, he had his eyes open today, but I want to get in. The main point of this conversation this evening, the whole point of the conversation is discussing, the court system, knowing how your liability in the court system works, figuring out how to file in the court system compared to the legal court system, Article, what is that? That's Article 1 courts versus Article 3 courts. And we've had several talk shows on this one over the last year. And it's bringing up what the truth is compared to what people think the imagination of their own mind is telling them. And that is very important because it's not being rude or disrespectful. I mean, come on. We all don't get it sometimes. We open our eyes up late after we do a case, or we open our eyes up after the situation's already been through. And so this is something that we are working on today and bringing these facts up. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and have
all participants are unmuted.
Thank you. So, Eugene, the floor is yours.
Yeah, like I was the one that won the Shackman, which is a really First Amendment case, And now we got to be heard by the Supreme Court because we put their clerks in prison from us. They can't do anything. So it's us and the Supreme Court judges got to talk now because the clerks and all that try to stop you. They're the bad ones here. But what everybody's got to understand out there, this goes in with everybody. Put in your First Amendment rights and your tapes and your transcripts. And I first was brought onto this by knowing the children's cases and that, what you were talking about before, Ed, where they take your children. And there's a special person out there to me, this Bianca girl, and she's terrific. And they took her kids just like that overnight because the judge knew the grandfather of the other side. And the grandfather, I heard this myself because I was up in Rolling Meadows and Buffalo Grove, and we stopped in a Walgreens, and I heard the court personnel lady talking to her and saying, well, the guy's grandfather called up and said they don't want this case to go on. They want to give it up. So I knew they were acting like gods there. So since I had my own case and I went through it and we won the case, and Tim will tell you more about that later because he's into more of that. But this part, so I stopped with her and started talking to her about that, and we got to be real close then. And basically, then we found out how bad it was. I read a journal from her daughter, and this is heart-tugging. This is why I wanted to bring this out for all the fathers and mothers out there that lost their kids and everything like that, true judges who think they're gods and they're not gods, and they can be stopped. And that's what we're going to do when we go up to the Supreme Court and ask for the tapes and everything so that you can get the right records to your court, not the forged transcripts. So basically, her case was so bad, it brought tears to my eyes. And me, I never knew stuff like this because I didn't have little children or nothing like that or kids. And basically, what happened is they just came with a warrant and took the kid away because that's what he says. If you divorce me or something like that, I'm going to have my grandfather do what he can do, and he'll take care of this. And this is a terrible thing to happen. I'll write an affidavit to hearing this from court personnel. And then basically, they took the child away from her and the daughter away, and it was so terrible there that I read a journal from the girl, and it said about the baby had to have a nebulizer. Do you know those other parents that she was living with wouldn't go get the nebulizer? The guy from Walgreens called up 3-4 times, and they wouldn't pick it up, and the medicine. And
now that would be the foster parents, right?
Well, not the foster parent, but the father of the baby. They just stole it from the kid because the judge and the father were great friends, Okay? And that can be proven, too. And I'll write an affidavit to hearing this because I did hear it. And then basically think about that. Then when the kid's there and they treat the kid like that and the child was under some kind of abuse and they wouldn't take it to the hospital of where the grandmother's people were and took it to their hospital to have that taken care of. You know how that works, Ed. Mm-hmm. And then basically they her husband broke her ankle, the daughter's ankle. And they wouldn't even let them take the crutches in the house. It's in the journal written there. And it's in there, they wouldn't let them take the crutches in the house because there was no room for it. So she had to hop around on that broken ankle. And if that ain't hell, I don't know what is hell. So basically, I've got a hell of a case in here, and we're going to the Supreme Court, and Tim will tell you about it, and we should win it. There's no way you can lose it because the Supreme Court has to be for me. They're the ones that wrote up the rules for me. And basically, they're the witness to this. And once we got rid of the buffers, and that's your clerks, then it's just me and them now in the Supreme Court. And we'll try to get the tapes for everybody and everything because you're allowed to get that. Because my judge said, hey, I can't give you the tapes. If I give you the tapes, we've got to give them to everybody, and then everybody will be playing them on TV at night. So you know what that means. You've got to be a dope not to know what that means. But getting back to this heart tugger, and it's a heart tugger, because the girl is special. I mean, she is really something else, and she's a great mother, and she's got her daughter there. But they broke up the family. They broke up that family that was doing good and put them with these people. And how you could do that, God only knows. So I'm not going to be made whole, and I got to be made whole in my case because it's a First Amendment case, one of the first ones up there. And if I'm not made whole, I ain't settled this until I get this all out. And making me whole has to give her back her children and have everything the way it was from the start, or I can give an end to these guys. So basically that's what we're going to do, because it opens your eyes when things like that happen, and you see things like that happen, and it ain't happening to me. It's happening to a lot of fathers and mothers out there, and especially to this girl. So you could take it from there. What do you think about something like that, Ed?
No, I've dealt with things like that, and that's the point. And the Supreme Court came out January 27th, 2018, says you need a warrant, and a warrant has to be signed by a grand jury or a judge that is Constitution as an oath, and nobody else. Robo stamps. Anybody who uses a stamp trying to say that that's a warrant, that's a federal crime, because you're impersonating an officer of the court by stamping it. And so this is the one thing that is getting the proper education out there, so people get to know how to do these in their cases and stand up for their children and their bloodline. Because people always tell me, and I've been on hundreds of talk shows, and people tell me, well, the bloodline means nothing. You know, oh, yeah, you go tell that to the Rothschilds, the Fairchilds. Their bloodline, look what their bloodline has done to you in this country. Wake up. Quit living in fantasy. And they know what they're doing. I mean, I've even got the Oregon State DHS manual that even states how that they're educating their DHS workers how, this is the one thing you're going to love, how to tap into the federal FOR money that Clinton set up for the children, so that way they can sit there and rape, rob, and pillage the funding from the states, so that way they can make the more money off of it. And that's how they do it in jails. Jails are privately owned. They're not publicly owned. They haven't been publicly owned for over 30 years. So people need to realize this. So go ahead, Eugene.
Well,
get into your case a little bit more.
Well, Tim wants to get in now. If you call him, I don't know if he hit the line yet or got on.
We haven't seen Tim on the line yet.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can give him the number. Oh.
I just got off the phone with him 15 minutes before we started the show, and I gave him the number.
I have it.
So why don't you see what's going on with him, because we expected him here too.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we didn't, have to go do something else, but get a little further into your case until Tim comes, because explain how you got where you are in your case, why you're going in this direction, so that way people comprehend this is the directions that you have to go to win, not sit there and play their administrative rules.
Well, this is actually a First Amendment case, okay? And the Shackman really is a First Amendment case because he went in there to file because he wasn't getting people to vote for Chicago because basically they were held back because of patronage, and patronage is illegal. It's extortion.
You want to mute Goldie, please, because Goldie's in the background. I believe that's her phone that's speaking up, so can we mute the background noise? All right, go ahead, Eugene.
That's not me. I am muted. That's Eugene's phone.
Oh, okay.
There's nobody here, so. But basically, what I was trying to tell you is that it's a First Amendment issue. So basically, when you got the First Amendment, you can go up there and you're supposed to be heard. Anybody with the First Amendment can be heard, and that's true, and they've got to. But like the clerks try to put a buffer between it and there. And they're supposed to make you whole. And to make me whole, they'd have to give up, what they're supposed to do, the right thing. We'll get on with that later because the lady will ask a couple questions and come on here. So basically, what I was saying to you, maybe Tim would want to get on now because Tim is there. Tim?
Okay, can we get Tim there?
I don't know what happened with Tim.
I don't know.
I don't know if they knocked him off or what.
I have texted him. I'm waiting for a response. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Goldie. Because this is the one thing that getting this out correctly to the general public on this stuff, and like I said, it really gets this frustrating when you have people that want help, they want to do this stuff, and then you bring up how to start succeeding, how to go through this, and it's really sad when people don't want to work for it. They want you to write their stuff up, or everybody goes, well, we need to hire an attorney. Well, you hire an attorney, you give up your constitutional rights. Period. You have none if you hire an attorney. An attorney works for the bar.
No, you can't. You can't, Ed. You can't do it with an attorney because an attorney can't ask the questions a pro se can ask.
Well, yeah.
You know, and they don't want a pro se up inside the Supreme Court because that'll set a precedent. And see, when a pro se sets a precedent, then they're in trouble. There's a lot of judges who didn't want us to get through this all the way, and they were trying to hold us back. And until you get to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court agrees with all these judges and tells them what to do the right way, that's the only way anybody's going to listen out there. Because they can go to their own courts and it's just not going to work. That's the point. So basically what we did is we fought all the way up here. We got up. It took quite a while, but they were forging left and right, doing things that were wrong, and we caught them at every turn. And what we did is we turned their evidence around on them. And basically part of their job is to make us whole. And see, the point is if they don't make you whole, they're not fulfilling their contract. And this basically is a contract. The Shackman is a consent decree, which is a contract with the Supreme Court and the Seventh Circuit, and also with the city of Chicago. And if they don't obey this, then they're breaking the law. So now only did they break the law, but they broke Rule 11E, which states that if you take anything out and you don't put it back in that file, including the tapes or whatever it is, you can't put another motion in. So when I go in there this time against them, there's nobody can be on the other side. It's me and just the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has to be for me because they're not there. They had to do something wrong. And plus, the Supreme Court is the one that sets up the rules and made the Seventh Circuit and the Northern District follow this. It's in H2 of the Shackman Decree. So basically, we'll have this one. There's no way around this. So now that we got in there, the clerks try to hold you back and throw you back and use the same things that are used in the lower courts. But once you put some kind of suit on them and you put them in league, we put them in league with the Seventh Circuit because they were trying to do their adherence to this. So basically, we've got this now. So it's us against the Supreme Court talking with no one else on the other side, Ed. So that makes you eventually the winner.
Yeah, and that was the point of filing the paperwork, going through this process, learning the steps, folks, because as you learn the steps, you know, then this way you can pass that knowledge to somebody else who's going through what you went through. It's all about education.
That's correct. And, you know, Ed, it gets to the point where you really worry about the children because they got no one protecting them. And see, the courts then try to make the lady look bad or make the people out there. I think the people know because they went to all kind of different people out there, and they probably went to the different places that they're supposed to help them and do things for them, and they got no help at all. And you feel for these people.
Yeah.
And this lady taught me how to feel for her and her kids because she just can't get away from what's happening to her and her daughter. It's a shame. And basically, we're going to try to make this right and do the right thing here. So basically, it works with all the cases. It's not just my case being up there because that was Rule 11E. A lot of people got 11E. If their stuff is not put back in their places or anything like that, they got the same rules that I've got. But you got to get to the Supreme Court to make them tell the rest of the country, let's do it the right way. See,
well, that even includes with traffic cases.
John, I'll just be quiet. Okay, bye.
That people need to comprehend with traffic cases, it's the same thing. When they violate their oath of office, you have to take them to the Supreme Court. And everybody wants to fight in their state courts. So the state Supreme Court says, like, no, you're going to lose.
May I have the floor for a moment, please?
Go ahead.
Kim is unable to get through for some reason. I'm going to drop off and bring him back on. So watch my number. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll
call right back.
A lot of times they'll knock you off and knock people off. That happened today a couple of times to us. But like I'm saying, once you hear these cases, and please don't believe me, it's not just my case in there. Once I'm in there and they have to give up these tapes and they have to do that, they got to give it to all you people. And that's the place you got to go to get this done. And we're right there at the Supreme Court. They tried to hold us back by using the same things they did with the clerks and the other. But we put a suit on the clerks and put them in line with the Seventh Circuit. And now it's just us and the Supreme Court. And after that, it's the Army and President Trump. And believe me, without President Trump, we couldn't have got this far. Because the other people that were in there, including Bush and the rest of them, they all held back. When Trump says to you 10, 20, and 30, whether you like the man or not, that's the only reason we're here today knocking on this door. Because we've been out here for 30 years having all the evidence in the world with them saying things like they're trying to change the docket. It is. You should see the evidence that we got if you go to the websites. And It's unbelievable. And that happened to you guys, but you guys just didn't know it or weren't lucky enough to catch them at this. And like I said, when I talked to this woman, Bianca, and she's a really special person, you know, I mean, she's just hurting all over from this, and it makes you hurt. It makes me hurt for all the people out there that lost their kids. You know, you just don't think about yourself. You think about everybody out there and why we can't get a fair trial or a fair shake on everything. So this way we've got them against the wall now. We got them against a rock and a hard place. So they're going to have to rule for us because the Supreme Court made up these laws on the Shackman, which is just a First Amendment case. That's all it is. So it's the First Amendment, and they've got to hear this. And they've got to hear this because the other side of the Rule 11E, and that's of the withdrawal slips, you can look to it on our website, that they can't put in another motion. They can't even motion against me in the Supreme Court. They can't say anything. They can't do anything. It's me and them now. So, Ed, I had to bring this out on this so the public can know how this works.
Right. And that's the whole point. Like when I'm filing this affidavits on the sheriff, and I'll get the ones done on the county commissioners here soon, because I've been trying to get that done for the last 3 weeks, but you know, I've been fighting my computer. But once we are able to start getting this stuff filed on the other side, they have to admit either they're lawful or legal. And if you go on some of the sheriff sites, you'll find that it says that they're a private corporation. Well, if they're advertising as a private corporation, that means they are not a we the people government agency of the republic. They are a democracy system.
Well, you know what, Ed, though, too, is everybody goes to the U.S. attorney. See, what we did is for all the years we've been out there, we went to every new U.S. attorney, gave them the same affidavits. When we were out there, and they had all the new U.S. attorneys who would come in every so often, every so many years and that stuff, and they bring them in, and we go to the FBI, you'd hand them the affidavits and the evidence, and they would do nothing.
Right.
They would not help any of the people at all. So basically what Trump is saying is correct. The people at the top are bad, but the people at the bottom, they're trying to say they're all good and everything. Well, sure, they might do things out there for you, but they ain't going to stand up to their bosses and tell them, hey, you're wrong and these things should happen. Or they're not going to have that baby go back to this grandmother that takes care of her. They're going to leave her with the bad ones because they can't upset the judges. Well,
May I have the floor, please?
Go ahead, Goldie.
I have Mr. Tim O'Connell on the line.
Oh, okay.
O'Donnell.
It's O'Donnell.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I have Tim O'Donnell.
Okay,
I was having some issues with my carrier.
Hang on a minute. Let Eugene finish, and then we'll give the floor to you, Tim.
Yeah, well, Tim has been helping out. He's a great part of this, and there's a great group of people that are helping us do this, and we're doing it legally. But the point is, you can't think we're just doing it because of a truck driver. We're doing this because of the Constitution. And we've got the Constitution in this. And the Constitution goes with all these mothers and fathers, too, and they should get every set of rules that we get. And once you get somebody up in that Supreme Court and it's them against you, there's no other way they can rule. Because if there's no one on the other side, Ed, then they got to make me whole. And making me whole is have to straighten out some of these cases that they've done. And we get fraud here. And you know what, Ed? Some of these judges knock these women so bad, make them look so bad, they don't even let them talk, and that's a shame. Those children are not getting the protection they should be getting. So that Tim could take it from there, and later on when we have some call-ins, maybe I can talk to somebody.
Right. All right, so let's go ahead. Tim, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm coming in a little bit at a disadvantage. I had some issue there with my carrier. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, I'm here now, and so I'm just now entering the conversation. I don't really know what was said before. So let's just go ahead and continue, and I'll jump in where I can.
Well, Tim,
okay. Go ahead, Eugene.
I was explaining about the case, and I was explaining about the Rule 11E, and, you know, what we got and how far we went, and that we're the only ones that could be up there. They can't even go against us up there in the Supreme Court, and that we had to hold back the clerks, who are the ones that are really the buffers between the judges and the people. And then I was talking about Bianca's case, how she was, her granddaughter was taken away, and they wouldn't get the nebulizer. It was really a heart-tugging story. We can get into that a little bit later, but I already told them the story. And we're trying to get the kids back for her and settle without these kids. So basically, Tim, you know how it works. So tell them from there about how far we went with this case and what you did to go to the Supreme Court.
Well, the first thing Eugene tried, we were working on it for several months, and we had what we thought was a pretty good motion for City of Chicago. Eugene tried to file this in the courts in Chicago in March. And if memory serves me correctly, the clerk took the filing and handed it to a judge, the judge, whoever was on duty. We have all that written down. We've got all the records of it. And then after it took about 40 minutes, and they said they wouldn't take the case. They didn't give any rationale. There wasn't any deficiency cited. And the only thing we could get them to do was stamp the back of the motion to show that we'd been there. So shortly after that, we filed an affidavit. And from there, we decided, this is too much fraud in the lower courts. There's just too much going on. These are all valid citations. Eugene decided to go straight to the Supreme Court. In fact, it was at Eugene's direction that we were able to craft a motion that got us, I don't know, Eugene. So we've been in the Supreme Court now since, or at least at the office since 19 July, right?
Right. But 17, 19, yeah.
Yeah, we filed on the 16th, sent it on the 17th, 19 July. So 19 July, and then 3 times now, the clerks of the Supreme Court have entered into the frauds against Eugene. The only things that were cited in this current motion, this isn't the same motion that was tried in Chicago. The only things that are cited in this current motion are 2 instances of one's a theft against the court and one's a fraud. And the theft against the court happened by an officer of the court who was acting on behalf of, it was an assistant U.S. attorney at that time. We don't know if he was moonlighting or if he was double dipping, but in any case, maybe we'll find out at some point. But he was acting in a private capacity as corporation counsel for the City of Chicago. That person did, in fact, we have the signed clerk's receipt. That person did, in fact, remove a court record from Eugene's case. And then that record was never returned to this day. This is now some 28 years later. And yet 17 days after that record was removed, the decision was made in the case unfavorable to Eugene. Now that's a Rule 11E violation by any measure, and there's no time limitation on a Rule 11E violation. That's just how Rule 11E of the courts was designed. It's designed to prevent anybody from even thinking about taking documents or evidence from the court, because at that point, if those materials are never returned, then that plaintiff or that defendant can never file another motion with the court until the material is returned. So it's been 28 years that the City of Chicago has been in default to Rule 11E.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have the clerks of the Supreme Court upholding a fraud of a Rule 11E in a Shackman case, which is a First Amendment case, which is a Shackman violation, fraud against Eugene's First Amendment rights, which Eugene won. He won 3 decisions in a row. Then the only logical conclusion was for Eugene to enjoin the clerks of the Supreme Court in a Shackman violation, an ongoing Shackman violation, which has no time limitation because Eugene's the only person that holds the Shackman right now, and also in an ongoing Rule 11E violation, which also has no time limitation. And the only things these clerks were able to cite the entire time since 17 July was all these notions of latches and time limitations and, statutes of filing and that sort of thing, which is purely fraud. So we have the frauds going all the way from City of Chicago, which was the defendant in this case, through multiple decisions in the lower courts. And then we have the lower courts, the Northern District Court, but also the Seventh Circuit in multiple frauds that had to be assisted by the clerks, court recorders, and transcriptionists had to be. Otherwise, they couldn't have happened. And then all the way up to the Supreme Court now with the clerks of the Supreme Court, there's only one more stop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the justices themselves. There's only one more stop. So, the question we had in our last interview, Eugene's last interview was, Your Honors, where are you? Supreme Court, where are you? They hold the contract. They hold the Shackman. They're technically partners with Eugene in this contract now. So where are they? That's our next plea.
Yeah, and like I said, I want to be able to get you the laws that I have on the clerks too, because I don't know if they're the same what you have or not. But these ones actually go that if they're not registered with the 1938 Foreign Administration Registration Act, it's a federal crime. Also, too, if they do what you have stated, that's a crime, and you can file on them through the administrative rules that I have on this. And the Supreme Court is supposed to basically terminate them. And so
that's what I was thinking, certainly.
Yeah, and so that's the whole point here is working and getting this thing so we start getting more than one of these situations. Because what I've been doing when I'm served on the sheriffs and stuff, I'm serving on them to prove that they have authority, to prove their budget, to prove their oath, to prove that, here's what the Supreme Court, here's Oregon state law. How come you're rape, robbing, and pillaging? Because Oregon state law administrative rules are the same with every state that you don't need a driver's license to travel unless you're in commercial business.
Correct.
And that's the thing that, come on, people. You're the problem because you're allowing these men and women to get away with it. And I've had so many people like you guys have probably had, I'd just much rather pay it and not deal with it. It's cheaper. And I said, so in other words, you're doing that to your child and putting them in slavery. And so you're the responsible party doing that to your own child.
Well, when you don't stand up for your rights and you stand in the frauds that are offered to you, then you become a party to the fraud, and the law has no opinion on that because that's consensual.
No, they do have laws on it. There has been decisions.
Well, I'm saying that. Well, let me say the
Right.
lawyers and the judges, they'll have no opinion on that. They'll just let you stand in fraud because now you're conceding to the fraud, so now it's yours.
Right. That's what they try.
In their opinions, yes.
Right, exactly, and that's what they try to pay off. Go ahead, finish up.
Oh no, that's a very good point, and that's pretty much the way we were trying to position this. Is that the courts, being a party, they're now essentially the executors or the trustees, if you will, in this Shackman case. It's a trust essentially. Eugene holds that contract, and so he's on the same side as the trustees. The city of Chicago's been in contempt of court, best we can tell now, for at least 27 years. So, where are your honors? The clerks won't give us your honors, so we've got to find another path.
Well, in the city of Chicago still in bankruptcy?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Eugene knows more about that.
Well, they borrowed a bunch of money, so they still should have some kind of money. And then you got to look at the two sets of books, because there's usually two sets of books, maybe three. So you don't know where they're at with that. You know what I mean?
There's, I guess there's the books they show the public, and then there's the books after the payoffs.
See, but it doesn't matter, Ed, because you got to look at this fact here. If I'm the only one in the Supreme Court arguing, the other people can't be in there because they did something wrong. So how are they going to rule against me? And they're the ones that are holding the rule over the Shackman, which is really a First Amendment.
Right.
So actually, it's the First Amendment right that we got up there, and we couldn't find no other cases but mine with it. We had to use my case alone in there. We didn't have to use no cases to add. They couldn't add no cases. Nobody could. So it stands by itself. And the court, the Supreme Court, if they don't rule for us, they have to be standing in fraud. Right, Tip?
And that's going to be a very delicate situation for them. I don't think it's going to be delicate for Eugene. You can go on the nightly news and talk about it if he wants, if they'd have him.
Oh, yeah.
You know better.
Sure.
See, so they're between a rock and a hard place here. Because after that, it becomes the Army. So they should never let this get true, but it got true. And they have to make you whole. And that comes into adding the other parts.
Have the floor for a moment.
Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead, Goldie.
I have just realized that somehow, some way, my entire Eugene Zorich page, Facebook page, on my phone has been wiped out. There's nothing on it. It says no post, but I can get it on my computer, but not on my phone.
You might need to restart your phone. You can't do it right now, yeah. Yeah,
it looks like it's being blocked.
That's the point.
I just wanted Eugene to know that they're trying to stop this from getting out there.
Well, we already know that they've been doing that.
But Twitter, my computer's doing just fine. I can get it up on my computer, and I can get it on my Twitter, but just not my phone. So I'll work on that technically later, but definitely being blocked. It says there's no posts at all on the page.
Okay.
So, sorry about that, guys. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Eugene.
What I was saying about that, Ed, is they can forge for so while, but then eventually you catch them. And you catch them with everybody. So once this comes out this way for us, it'll come out for the rest of the country this way. And that's why Donald Trump is having such a hard time. It isn't Republicans and Democrats. They're all the same thing. The point is they're trying not for him to get this out and shut back the people. So those people that are against Donald Trump are really silly people because this is the only way this could have gotten out. with him being in there and doing this and changing the system. Because the system is amidst a change now. This is like a revolution. It's just like say Bianca and her child and the rest of their children out there. They're taken away, and their evidence is taken away from them, and they made them look like bad people by the courts. And they're not bad people. They're good people. I can tell you that for a fact. And that's why we're going to use this to make us whole by getting these kids back. That's the only way you can do these things. You can't have them put in the hands of people that shouldn't have them just because they're friends of judges. Right, Tim?
That's absolutely correct. And I'd like to add a couple of things to what Eugene just said. First off, really briefly about Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, or you voted for him or you didn't, or whatever. Maybe you think the world's going to heck in a handbasket because he's in the presidency. The thing to remember about Donald Trump is he is a disruptor. He is disrupting the system, the status quo. And I like some of the things he's doing. There's a few things he's doing I don't really care for. I don't know why he's doing those things. But by and large, he's disrupting the status quo, which has to go. That has to stop. Whatever the status quo is in Washington, it's definitely a swamp. And any efforts by anybody to drain that swamp, I'm applauding at the moment. So you have to remember that.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that people have to comprehend what the truth is, compared to like what the Democrats are coming out and these other agencies are coming out and telling everybody, we're losing our democracy. We got to save our democracy. Well, we don't want democracy. We want it to go back to England. We don't want it in our country. We want the republic form of government that we were promised.
Right.
And so we get our promise of the republic form of government. Now we've got justice, and that means a lot of these public servants are going to end up in prison. And they're freaking
as being
out.
Imposters. Yeah.
Well, they're freaking out because now all of a sudden they're going. A lot of these people right now are retiring left and right across the country. They're making plea deals and stuff like this, and it really is happening. But it's not in the mainstream media. It's not basically on any media except for a couple of local medias, and we post everything that we get that brings it out too. And so that's the whole point, is getting this out. And that's the one thing, is that when you're bringing this out with a case like, I'm going to be doing too, because if I don't get the response from the sheriff, I have to file on them criminally because they failed in their duty. And not only that, I got a Supreme Court decision that's going to freak them out when they get that in the email, because the Supreme Court decision says the sheriff has no authority and no power whatsoever to arrest or have contact with we the people.
Correct.
Because
and we
they
are
were
getting some traction.
Yeah, they were formed. And that was a decision that just came out 2013. But was it ever published or made known? I was lucky that I found it because somebody passed it on, and then I called the Supreme Court themselves, and they sent me an email with a certified copy of the case. So, and it's like, that's why I try to explain to people, this is real. This is what's really going on. This is not a joke what's going on about the things changing, and more people that are getting this out and changing it. This is how we're going to make the change. This is how the children are going to be protected.
You got to
You
got to do it in the
Sorry, Eugene, go ahead.
You got to do it in the Supreme Court, Ed. The point is you can't.
I'm on the same page with you on that. I know that.
And you can't do it one day at a time. And we got to the Supreme Court now, and there's no reason to turn this down, and they're going to have to answer. And both sides have to stick with me because they made the rules. It's their contract, and I want it. So now they can't do anything. What? If they say no, then we can go to the Army and make it happen. And it's the same thing with these cases, with these kids and that out there. Because, basically you're not doing it just for yourself. It's the whole country that's getting screwed up by these people. These mothers, they're tugging at their hearts. I learned that myself from Bianca and that. They just can't take what's going on out there. They try, fall asleep writing briefs and writing the stuff that people just throw out the door. You got to know what's happening. You got to get them from the start. See, I knew from the start what was happening. So I knew how to go about this. And basically, it isn't about just me or anybody else, but it's somebody's got to get through and open the door and make them make a decision. It's got to come from the Supreme Court. That they always give you your audio tapes and everything else. That's why they're blocking her cell phone and this and that, because once you're in there, you automatically get your tapes. And in my Rule 11E, it shows that your tapes are part of the stuff you can't take out.
Mm-hmm.
See, the tape.
That's never supposed to leave the clerk's office. So how did this assistant U.S. attorney who was moonlighting as a corporation counsel manage to leave the room with that tape?
His name was Lawrence Rosenthal. So we're getting you the tape.
And it's that Lawrence Rosenthal, if anybody's wondering. It's the one you can look up on Wikipedia.
The big guy. So he's the one that everybody thinks about are doing good. Most of these people that everybody say they're so great out there, they're not. See, it's the point.
Yeah, when you look into the sock drawer, there's a big bag of money there. I'm just saying, figuratively speaking, like, how did that happen?
And someone's got to stand up for the people, because you know what, they just can't do it themselves. Some people can't do it. It's hard. I understand. People don't want to go and face court or want to ask questions and that, but someone's got to do it. You just can't let it go on like this. And we won this. And here's another thing, Ed. Since I won the case, and I won the case back in '88 of July the 6th, he wrote it right in the thing so that the clerks wouldn't change the ruling. So he gave me the ruling.
Judge Duff. This is Judge Duff.
Yeah, now here's the point to this, Ed. Once I won that, there is no appeal. If you read the Shackman, they can't appeal anything, and they still tried to appeal it.
It's a contract.
And you can't appeal the contract because they couldn't have one loss. There was thousands of people that went through, and they all lost had a little bit that settled, that's all, but, for a little bit of money, a certain amount. But I won it. So, in other words, they're dead. And the Shackman case never existed after 1990. He was dead. I'm the guy, not him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was at least 89, if not 90 is the latest. 89, I believe, is when Eugene won it, took it.
It's dead.
Twice.
And the way they treat these people out there, and the way they talk about these women, and they say things, and they're not this and they're not that. It's just who you know in the courtroom. That's got to stop. They can't go on.
Or who can afford the better attorney, the better connected attorney? I mean, that's not justice, and that's certainly not serving our next generation at all.
No, it's not. And the other point of all this, these guys are still sleeping in the same bed, and they're passing the same bed around through the back room, and people have got to realize this is real what's going on. That's why I always get on people's case going, watch this movie, because they'll explain it, Interstate 60. And once you start putting more and more of the pages together, then all of a sudden you start realizing what all the truth really is compared to what we're led to believe.
Yeah.
It's like Christmas and Disneyland and all that. It's like all that's make-believe because that was formed for corporations to make a living and for the taxes for the British government. It had nothing to do with we the people.
Well, Christmas is a retail holiday, and if everybody would just treat it as a retail holiday and stop trying to make it a religious holiday, it would be a fun thing. But I just can't enjoy it that much because it's so over the top, and it's so conflicted. Yeah, I just stopped participating in Christmas sometime in my 20s, and I'm 58 years old now. And I will occasionally send cards, and I'll tell people, have a great holiday, and I'll go to parties and things. But I just don't deal with the consumerism. If it was just blatantly consumeristic, I could get into it a little bit. But they try to make it a religious holiday too, and it's sort of like it cheapens both. It kind of ruins both for me.
You are nuts.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page of you on that one because it just drives me nuts. And the other one is Easter, and then we got the satanic Halloween, Halloween, and let's give all the kids candy and
Day of the Dead.
Yeah. And rot their teeth
it's
out.
Where we
so that way
celebrate the wicked witch that takes little kids into the dungeon and tortures them and murders them. That's not really a good thing to teach your kids. Not that it isn't necessarily true in cases, but you
guys got to care a little bit about the children too, because I'll tell you something right now. They're the ones that are suffering here. They're broke up from home. So many parents have committed suicide over this. How many homes broke up over this stuff? How
many kids are so psychologically damaged over it?
That's right. And
for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their lives.
See, I wouldn't have learned this if it wasn't.
So they can never hold a positive relationship because they just can't trust anybody, and that's the real toll right there.
Yeah, and unless somebody shows you, like a woman that's really crying for her kids and stuff like that, who's really a good person, is getting knocked down by the court, then you realize, hey, you got to go all the way with these guys. You've got to do the right thing to straighten this out. These people are lying. This isn't true. I'm going to tell you something right now, Ed. If there's forgery in that case is over. It's just like Trump.
Oh, yeah.
When they got Trump in this civil court, this court that they got here, if there's fraud in that case, that's thrown out the door. Trump hasn't got nothing to worry about.
Not only that, but this lady needs to be filing on the judge herself because what the judge did, he violated the oath. He didn't take everything into consideration into evidence.
Right, their case is no good. I mean,
or let's say didn't allow. That's the most common thing is they don't allow it.
It's not that they don't take it. Okay, yeah.
It's the exact opposite. They don't even allow it into evidence because they know if it's in evidence, they're going to be responsible for it. So they disallow it. And that's a procedural move, but it's also illegal.
That goes for all the women out there and stuff that they don't get any help from the U.S. attorneys, from anybody, from lawyers, from this, from that. They're just sold out. It breaks your heart. You know what I mean? And once you see this, then you're really an advocate for this. And people teach you how to be an advocate for that, even if you haven't got children. So basically, you're trying to do the best thing you can do. And if we can do this, then we can open up the door so they get a fair shake with their tapes. Now think about this, Ed. Your tape costs maybe $20. They're charging you $800,000, $700,000 for transcripts. Look what they're making. And the transcripts are... So what are you buying, Ed? Where's your justice at? Where's anything at?
Well, and the other point is, see, that one thing is I'm doing with people, too, is we're filing in a court because I got the administrative rules and the deal that court costs are paid by them, not us.
Right, they should.
And so that's the one thing that people need to file because, see, what they do when they collect your money, that's their party money. Then they write it off at the end of the year on their IRS tax forms if they are filing. And so we don't know if they're filing their own taxes. So if they're not filing the taxes or the income that comes into that court, that needs to be filed with the IRS under a 1099 form because if you pay anything in the court, always file a 1099 form if you're in that system. Always file it because then they have to investigate the court system, and if they're not paying taxes, they do shut them down.
Wow. That's a great one. I like that.
Yeah, and that's happened. We've got cases that...
So even a $100 fine, let's say.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
And the city of California just got through eliminating $32 million of state debt funding in the court system itself. They just did that last week. So when they're sitting there and telling you that they can't write this stuff off and all this stuff, they lie to you. They can write it off, but they don't want to because when they write it off, they lose their play money. And they don't want to lose their play money. And this is where people have got to realize it.
See, that's the slush fund. That's the stuff that comes right back out into these campaigns, and you wonder where these people who are basically inelectable get money to run these campaigns.
Right.
Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, until about 30 years ago, people didn't they didn't raise money for campaigns, or basically because the newspapers and news medias always ran their stuff, and it was a tax write-off. It was free, but they changed the IRS administrative rules so that way they can basically buy elections now. So that way they're not, the businesses have to charge for it instead of writing it off.
And then a few years ago, the Supreme Court said that money equals free speech. That's interesting interpretation.
Yeah, that's why the Supreme Court stated that.
And that's like a neoliberal could have written that.
Right, and that's where people don't know why the Supreme Court said that. Well, they passed administrative rules, and so the Supreme Court is somewhat bounded by administrative rules because of their own structure. And so
it's almost like they said $1 equals one vote. But if that's the case, then we're all irrelevant.
Right. That's why I don't vote. I'm not in that system.
Well,
not a bad idea.
Also, the workers usually pay 10% of their salary to kick back for their jobs.
Yeah, I know that. They do that in the union,
like Chicago. Well, they pay it to the union, but then the unions aren't necessarily political organizations. But in a place like Chicago, they're almost paying it directly to the politicians. It doesn't really go to the union.
No, all unions are in the political arena. All of them. Not one of them is exempt.
They are, and that's why they're not exempt. They have to pay taxes. Yeah,
and so and a lot of them ain't even paying taxes either because they're getting around it because of their people they're putting in the office. And so that's the one thing that people got to realize how severe this is with politics. Because I've been pushing, and I'm thinking actually writing a ballot measure so that way all elected and public servants and registered church members and illegal immigrants and immigrants, period, cannot vote. And that's federal law. They cannot vote.
Well, according to the Constitution, correct?
Correct. And so that's why everybody keeps saying, oh, they're destroying our democracy because all these people are making so much money, basically the backdoor system that was created. And it is a democracy, and they don't want to lose their personal funding, their funding tree. That's like what I was we were talking about last night, and I was bringing up the point where, like, these universities and colleges and all this stuff, and all these people are out there doing, creating all these new jobs because there was no employment in the 90s and 2000s, right. And all these people were getting out of colleges and universities, and they had all these degrees. So what they did is they started all these nonprofits, like, you know, watershed projects and the Salmon Shed Foundations and all these things. And all they're doing is still funding, shoving public money into those, filtering out the money going through those so that way they cover it up. I mean, these guys have been well instructed on how to do it. They read the books themselves. And that's why we say they wrote it, we quote it. And that's where you have to use their administrative rules and the court system against them, because the court system has to defend themselves, and they don't want to defend themselves, but it's too late. That's part of the structure they're living right now.
Right.
You know, they have no choice.
Yeah. Can I share one definition of a democracy?
Oh, yeah.
And this is a very simplified definition of a democracy, which is why I say I'm glad we don't live in a democracy. But some people say that a democracy is 3 wolves and a chicken sitting at a table, and they're voting on what to have for dinner.
Yeah.
That's democracy. And if if you're on a playground, it would be like 5 kids sitting around looking at Johnny or Janie's brand new bike, and the other 4 kids don't have a bike, and they vote on, hey, who gets to ride Johnny and Janie's bike without asking Johnny or Janie. That's democracy. Democracy is mob rule. There's nothing pleasant about it.
No, I've got a photograph that we have up on our website where it's Disney takeoff, and it's the straw man being thrown in the fire to keep the light up for everybody else. And it's like, democracy, we voted, you lose, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people got to realize when you're doing these votings. And then you think that these tax increases, like right now, the cities and counties are raising taxes without a public vote. They're raising state and federal taxes without a public vote. And taxes can't even be raised without your vote 100%. And that's why I say...
I know. That's illegal.
Yeah, I know. And elected and public employees are doing this for their own personal gain. And it's like, I just cannot believe how ignorant people really are.
Can they be impeached? Can they be impeached for that act?
Yes.
Well, then maybe it's high time people started getting organized and doing that with their local officials, local city and county officials.
Right. That's exactly what I'm doing with these affidavits I'm putting out, because I'm getting them out and I'm setting it up, because if they don't respond to stuff, that's the backdoor way of impeachment.
Pretty much. In other words, it's an effective impeachment, isn't it? By not answering the affidavit.
Yes, that's the criminal charges that can be used under fraud and their budget, because we asked about their budget. We asked them what, why, and how. And so that is fraud, and so it is criminal. And so that's my next step, is to write that up. But like I said, I've been on here for the last 15 minutes, and my computer is still going, nee, hasn't even got the page yet. And so I'm still fighting. My computer is very heavy because, like I said, what we're bringing out, they don't want this stuff out because, you know, I mean, I've been doing this stuff. I've been publicly speaking on public hearings at the Oregon State House and Senate. I got YouTube videos of me serving the courts where the judges go after me in court, you know, and so I've even got videos where they're trying to shoot me, the cops, and everything else up on YouTube. So, I mean, they know, and everybody keeps going, well, Ed, you should be scared. I said, why? The evidence is there. If I die, they know who killed me.
It'll be a very short list of public employees.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, I actually publicized it in the newspaper for a month. 3 full pages in a newspaper of who, what, why, and how, even with the governor implicated in the facts. And nobody disputed that. It was even filed at the Oregon State House and Senate and the Secretary of State, and nobody went against it.
Well, let me say, getting back to your original idea, I think I heard it put a different way in history class. This was back when I was a kid. Didn't somebody once call it taxation without representation?
Yep.
Wasn't there a revolt against the colonies, revolted against the mothership England over this?
Yep.
I believe that's correct.
I believe you are correct.
People lay down today and just take it? I mean, is that what's going on? Really?
Yeah, that's the saddest part. But they've been so convinced by the churches. I mean, how many people you know that have been guilt into going to church? Oh, you don't go to church, you know, and
Right.
And this is the one thing, people get guilted into stuff, and then, oh, you have to believe in Jesus. Well, who's Jesus? Who's God? What is a God? Why is there a God?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, because you got the Queen of England saying she's a God. You got the, all these, the guy who runs Japan and China and all these guys, they're claiming they're gods.
Little Kim Jong over there in Korea.
Yep.
North Korea thinks he's a god.
You got it right. And so, that's why I keep going to people. Who's God? What God? Why God? And whose God are you praying to?
Right.
Because, I mean, that's the one thing. Everybody goes, oh, pray to Jesus. Who's Jesus? Why Jesus? And if you know German, which I don't know hardly any of it, but I do know in German, God is the devil, and that is in their own writings and stuff, and they don't deal with the Bible. But they're the ones who brought the Bible over here with the Mormons in the 1840s.
Well, and then Gutenberg invented the press, and the rest is history. You
got it, yeah. And so, I mean, and that's how we've got all brainwashed, convinced that we need to do this, that, and the other thing. And so this is why, and I mean, I've dealt with people who've even, when DHS or a cop comes up to their car and says, we're taking your kid, and they voluntarily give their kid over instead of going, where's the warrant? Where's this? Where's that? And then they start calling and freaking out and going on.
At that point, they already have your child, so you've already suffered a major loss there. So you're pretty much behind the eight ball, as they say.
But see how it goes in the court. You voluntarily turned your child over to the state.
Sure looks that way, doesn't it?
That's right, and that's how they play the stuff in court.
Well, Ed, though, the best way to beat them, Ed, is to show fraud upon the court, which vitiates everything.
That's right. But that's also, too, you have to file the criminal charges on the clerk. You have to file it on the judge. You have to file it on the sheriff deputy. You have to file it on each and every individual in that court proceeding going down the line, even with the people in the back door. The clerk that, you never saw that's redoing your file. And you could ask for how many people have touched this file, and you get their names and you file on them.
Sure, because you got to get justice. If you don't get justice, what good is the courtroom? See,
well, that's the whole point, yeah.
This is why we challenge them all the way to the Supreme Court now. See, they'll be standing in fraud if they don't answer the correct way. Right, Tim?
Yeah, that's correct. We have the clerks and their supervisor at this point.
Yeah, right up to the Supreme Court and to the justices, and they're got to be on my side. They can't be on the other side because there is no other side. See,
and they have to be on your side because they took a constitutional oath to protect the Constitution.
Yeah, no one got this far. I mean, everybody doesn't realize they think it's just one person or just being a truck driver. It doesn't got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with your First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the First Amendment right on our side, and they've got to be with us. It's
First Amendment. It's a contract.
It's a contract.
The other party who was defendant in the contract and originally settled out of court with a court order decree, the Shackman, lost. So they're standing multiple times now in contempt of the court.
Mm-hmm.
They can't show up because of the Rule 11E violation. They're barred by the rules of the court under the offense as it happened. It's an ongoing offense, so they can't say that it tabbed out at any time. So it's really kind of just a very unique situation, and that brings Eugene to where he is. But it's something that he has to pursue for the sake of the First Amendment, even if there was no money in it whatsoever, even if there was no. Yeah, it's to make himself whole again, because everything's said and done, there's been about 34 years of defamation against Eugene Zorich by City of Chicago.
Right.
So you have to look at it that way. You have to restore yourself. You have to make yourself whole again.
Yeah, and then we could get Eugene's side up so people could go look at it, because like you said, he did win the one court case, and so when he won it, they didn't want to pay it, they didn't want to deal with it, they tried to shove it back in the back room because they didn't want to deal with it.
Oh, they couldn't lose it. That's what people don't realize. They couldn't lose the Shackman because then it's over. They can't.
Yeah.
And they used the Shackman again for another 25 years.
Yeah.
Right, and in that way, when Trump was given the order that he could fire 500 judges across the country by the Supreme Court, and everybody's panicking, it's like, no, that was done correctly, because he needs to start firing these people, and then these other judges could be brought up on charges, because we just had another judge that was just brought up on charges for human trafficking dealing from DHS, and it proved out that Oh, he was one of the investors in the local courthouse, the jail.
Right.
Because all your jails are privately funded and privately run. And you got to realize that these attorneys, judges, your local businesses in your communities,
stockholders.
Yeah, they're stockholders of it, and that's why I always say, go to the deal and find out who the businesses are in your town that are investing into this to keep you in jail.
All but the federal prisons, I believe.
Yeah, the federal prisons are totally different.
Right.
And that's the one thing that people don't realize, and that's why when they're starting to release all these people that have been, even on so-called drug-related charges, they can't keep them in jail if there's no injured party or property damage.
Right, and while I've heard that the federal prisons are no picnic, they're still far better off than these private prisons in terms of safety of the inmates and.
These private prisons. I've been.
Oh my God! The stories.
Even in my local jail, when they try to kill me in the jail, that's the other thing that got to me. There's no TV. There's no basic running water in there. Then you're not allowed to have anything, and you got four walls. And if you ask for a book, they very rarely will give you one. And it just wants you to be in solitary confinement, and that's going back to the Christian wars. It's run the same exact way. So that's and we're in the 21st century, and our jail's running the same way it was done in the 14th century.
Yeah, I have a friend who I won't mention any names, but he's been sitting in a Florida correctional institution. He asked me to send him some books. So I said, "So what are the terms?" He's like, "Well, first off, I have to go to a bookstore. I have to buy a brand new book. The book has to be shipped to him at the correctional institution from the bookstore, and the bookstore has to be on an approved list."
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. So that pretty much rules out used books, doesn't it? Or anything
that's
that might
exactly
help
what it does
in his situation. It's all this new crap that's on the shelves, and
Well, they got to do that
because
because they have to keep the commercial commerce going. They have to keep that tax money coming in, and that's what they really do it by, and people don't comprehend that one.
I wanted to send him some stuff that he'd like to read, and those books are basically out of print. I know his taste, and it's like I can't, it's like I have to go to a used bookstore and see if I can get them on the list, and then convince them, say, hey, could you send these for me, and I'll buy a couple of books while I'm at it.
Right, right, and that is the one thing that shouldn't be really happening, because what are they going to do?
No.
Slip a saw in a book. Well, some people have tried that before, but
dogs. They can sniff the packages. It's not that.
Oh yeah, and they can even open the book and scan the book without ripping pages out or damaging the book to make sure there's nothing in the book. See, I mean, we're not doing common sense and reality anymore. We got the fair deception. Go ahead.
I was saying shipping that kind of illicit stuff through the mail is a federal offense anyway. Only an idiot would do that. So, they're really, it's just oppressive, is what it is. It's
they're
really
doing
oppressive.
it deliberately. It's called psychological war.
Sure. It's isolating the prisoner even further than they already are. And believe me, they are quite isolated.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I think the longest time I served in this jail was 3 days, and like I said, it was interesting because then they came up because they said, well, I signed the contract when I left jail, and 3 times the sheriff's deputy let me out of jail because he's like, do you want to sign it? And I said, no. He goes, let him out. And so the judge kept on coming after me going, you didn't sign the order that I told you to sign my way. And I said, well, who gives you authority to tell me what to do? This is on YouTube video. I'm going off on the judge.
That's coercion. Yeah, that's coercion.
Oh, yeah, no, I know that. And that's fraud. And that in coercion, there's no expiration date on that either. See, that's the one thing that people go, well, they say that they have a time limit because, you have so many years to do this and that. That's what they've done administratively, and that only applies to elected and public employees. It does not apply to the lawful bloodline natives.
Well, let's get into another quick topic here on coercion. It's going to be very quick, but let's just say, who's this fellow, Cohen, right? President Trump's former lawyer, Cohen. He just signed a plea deal to things that aren't even crimes.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me he wasn't coerced to do that.
Right.
Nobody signed, okay, I went to the grocery store today. I bought some items, I put them in my car, and I went home and I put them in the refrigerator in the cabinets. That's not a crime. Now, if I sign an affidavit that's claiming it's a crime, please somebody show me where the crime is.
Yeah.
How is that an indictment? How is that, something that they can put him in prison for, or hold over his head, make it. They've apparently bankrupted him. He was worth millions, and now he's kind of bankrupt now. I mean, how does that happen in a just society? Who does Mueller think he is?
Yeah, go ahead, Eugene.
Well, no, I was just saying about the whole thing with these people. They're being cheated every day as they go in these courtrooms. Where are you going to get justice if you don't get it from the court? What are you going to do here in this country?
Right.
What's your best shot at it, Ed? That's why basically we have the best shot right now, right at the U.S. Supreme Court, and Tim knows that right now, right, Tim?
Right.
I think the timing is perfect.
The timing is perfect here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys, because when you guys are doing this at the Supreme Court, and then I'm putting out these affidavits to the public employees, and, you know, they're freaking out, and I've been informed that they don't know how to answer this because they're freaking out, because if they answer it, it could put indictments on them.
Well, it could put them in prison for lying.
Yeah, well, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, because, I mean, their own response even proves that either they have to prove that they're elected a public employee, or they have to prove that they're a private corporation. And if they're a private corporation, they go to jail. And if they're elected a public employees violating their oath of servitude, they go to jail. So it's
the beauty of that is every single municipality in this country, city, state, local, incorporated, I believe even some of the unincorporated, has a DUNS number.
Yeah, we have it on our website. Yeah. We have their DUNS numbers on our website.
Dun & Bradstreet. Yeah, Dun & Bradstreet. Incorporated entities have a DUNS number.
You know who owns the DUNS number, don't you?
Yeah, it's a business.
Who do you think that owns them from Wall Street?
You have to follow up through the parentage, but yeah.
I said, do you know who owns the DUNS number in Wall Street?
I'm going to let you extrapolate on that one, because I think you've probably done a little more research in that area than I have.
It's the Queen of England and the Vatican and all the religious churches in your counties. They're all invested into that structure, and they own it through the Queen of England under the Bankruptcy Act, and the Bankruptcy Act is the British government went bankrupt to us. That's why they're having you use the federal debt note right now. So when you pay all these things and you buy groceries, and everybody keeps going, the federal debt's going up. Well, of course it is. You're using a promise-to-pay note that doesn't exist. Yeah. You know, the Federal Reserve note is a promise to pay. It's not money. There's nothing to back it up. There's no security for it. And that is the one thing that people are not comprehending. Well, when I was up at the Capitol, everybody says, take what you can get in. And it's like, you know, that's one thing is that I have a conscience. I just can't do it.
Well, the one thing for you got going is you got Trump that changed the system now. And now brought this out. If you didn't have Trump, this would keep on going and going and going. That brought us. If Hillary would have got put in that post, that's what I was shocked about, because I figured that they already had it set up for her to be posted, and then everybody panicked because Hillary Clinton, to my comprehension and my research, she signed a contract with the Queen of England to turn this country over to the Queen of England behind closed doors, so people wouldn't know that Britain had it until 10 years later, so until we got slapped with the United Nations walking in your door. That's right. And that's children, too. That's what's happening with the kids. They're just
exactly.
We have the, folks, let's just say folks on 4chan, all the autists and all those eminent and awesome citizen researchers on these various sites, Vote and 8chan and 4chan and a number of other sites, have really traced the Clinton Foundation to child trafficking in a number of places like Haiti. But it goes all the way back to Bosnia, too. That's where they started it in earnest. And I've heard the reports. And it's mind-boggling. Essentially these houses, they were like halfway houses that they set up during the Bosnian War, and because you have all these refugees, and the kids would just disappear, and they'd be. It was run by the military. Yep. So you had people in the military and the UN, the coalition forces. Yeah.
But wasn't that Hillary, the Secretary of State, at that point?
Well, under Bill, right?
Well, we don't know about that one, but
I'm just saying. No, this was Bosnia back when Bill was president. You remember the Serbian War in Bosnia and all that? Yeah. They started the human trafficking right there. They decided that was their trial balloon, and apparently it worked so well they expanded it to other areas of the world. I imagine they did in Libya.
And that's where Bosnia came out publicly and told everybody what was going on.
Well,
Yeah,
Did you watch the YouTube videos back then when they were saying that all the money was disappearing and the children were disappearing? These are the people in Bosnia saying this,
Yeah, and nobody was paying any attention.
That's right.
Well, you know what?
And there's a doctor that was he went in front of the UN. This was a Syrian doctor about a year and a half ago. Testified in front of UN officials. He said, in his estimation, he believes the minimum of 15,000 Syrian children, some of them who were just lightly wounded, were harvested, organ harvested.
Yeah.
They went across the border into Turkey or up there on the border, and they were organ harvested. I mean, that is massive war crimes. We should be having tribunals in The Hague right now. People should be, I don't care if they're ISIS. I don't care if they're the president of Turkey. I don't care if they're former Secretary of State of the United States. They should be being dragged in front of The Hague right now, in front of a hangman's noose.
Well, isn't that what we did was after World War II? And then
supposedly,
and then Clinton. I mean, not Clinton, but Trump just sent home some German World War II Hitler men that were here living on Social Security and stuff, and he cut them off, sent them back to Germany, and people
for war crimes. And they were functionaries.
Yeah, and ACLU.
They were run of the mill everyday prison guards and that kind of thing, but they had committed atrocities, and he said no. ICE is going to come back. He actually used ICE to do that because that's ICE's job. They're here illegally.
You know what you got to do though, Tim, is you got to teach the people out there how to win their cases simply, because some of them can't get into all this. And
right. Well, some of them can't handle the mind stuff on it too.
The main thing with this is the fraud in the case. Once there's fraud proven, the case is over, and you're the winner. So basically, you got to look for the fraud in your case.
For the case,
right?
In a personal case, absolutely. Look for the fraud. Look for the abuse. Look for the fraud on the court, especially.
We could talk like this for hours, but they're not educated to this level of doing it. They're worried about their own cases right now and what they could do.
Right.
And that's what I learned from worrying about the kids, from the person. So basically, what they have to do is show the fraud. The fraud vitiates the case, and that's it. It's over, and you're the winner, and they can't come back and take your kid back again or steal from you or do things from you. So basically, you got to keep it nice, simple, and go right at it with that.
Right.
I mean, you could talk about laws and that, but fraud.
Oh yeah.
Everything. See, so
let me localize this.
Okay.
If I can have a minute to localize
go ahead.
The official numbers, and if people think that human trafficking is not going on in the United States, these are the official numbers, okay? Let me get all the way through this thought. The official numbers, children missing every year, it's between 400,000 and 800,000. Now, that's a big range, but the minimum is 400,000 children missing per year. They claim that about half of those are just runaways. So that means 200,000 kids a year unexplained. How many Amber Alerts do you guys get? I get about 5 a year in Atlanta. We're supposed to be a trafficking hub. Anybody get any more than 4 or 5 Amber Alerts? Yeah, in Atlanta. We only get about 5 a year.
Because in other counties, they get them all the time.
Oh, but I mean, something's going on here. Like in Atlanta, it's supposed to be a trafficking hub, and we get about 5 Amber Alerts a year. And there's how many hundreds of thousands? I mean, this stuff happens. If you look at the map, it happens in clusters around certain metro areas and in certain rural areas. They're obviously rings working. Yeah. So I mean, and it's not just the government, but frankly, I think the government turns a blind eye to a lot of it. Who knows? Who knows what's going on?
Well,
but when it happens, when the court's doing it, now you've got a perp. Now you're a perpetrator. Now you can go after somebody.
Yeah, but Tim, you're right. The government turns a blind eye because we are the government. We, the people, are the government. We have employees that are sitting there profiteering on this.
Correct. That's my opinion. And I'll stick to it until I learn otherwise.
I've already written this stuff up and served this out.
Well, but I mean, those are abysmal numbers. Around the world, they say it's about 2 million children a year.
Yeah.
And for people to think that all this child trafficking stuff is being blown out of proportion, it's like, get real. It's happening in the courts. It's happening in DCFS. It's happening illicitly. It's happening across international borders. It's happening especially in war zones and natural disaster zones, especially. And people need to wake up. And if anybody's targeted your kids, you go after them. You don't just sit there and play meek. You go after them.
Right.
Don't let them do that to your kids. Don't let anybody do that to your kids. That's my advice, ever.
No, I agree with you. Anyhow, guys, we want to continue this too next Saturday, but I want to get the floor open because I did try to make it not a very long night for the producer. So we want to get the floor open and see if anybody else has got comments or thoughts, and if they don't, we'll continue back on for a few, and then we'll meet up next week. But then tomorrow night, we're starting on the Second Amendment on the rights and facts with the court case administrative rules. And remember, when these people say they never had a machine gun in 1700s, they had the punkle gun. I always call it the pickle gun, but I always get corrected. And it's like, that was a machine gun, folks. They already had this stuff. And if you go back even further, the Chinese had machine gun arrows. They used to line them up and then light them off with the gunpowder, with their own explosions on the end and stuff. See, this war stuff that they keep coming up and telling us that all this stuff is new. It's been around for thousands of years. It's just been improved.
Well, they definitely had cannons in the 1700s. So they
had cannons going back to the 1400s. They even were able to prove they had cannons going back realistically almost to the beginning of time, because they found ways of exploding these things out. And so that was the other thing. So, you know, when people confuse history, it's like, I always love when they say, well, you know, the dinosaurs were here 100 million years ago. Well, I mean, it's interesting that we can always assume. I didn't live 100 million years ago.
Yeah,
so
we don't have any eyewitnesses. Yeah.
You know, I can't witness what happened there, but I can't witness what's happened here in my time. You know, and so if I want to go into the other side, that could be technically called hearsay witness, because most of it is hearsay. So it's one of those things. So let's open up the floor, see if anybody would like to speak up or has any questions or thoughts themselves.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Ed.
Hello, who's this?
Hi, this is Bianca. How you
how you doing, Bianca?
Hi, Tim.
Hey, how you doing?
How you guys doing?
Good.
So, Bianca, are you on Facebook?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
My Facebook site is it's Edward Johnston, and it has a white teddy bear with a red rose.
Okay.
So how you feeling, Bianca?
I'm very heartbroken.
Well, we know that. But we want to get you the information on doing this. But remember, the only one who can write the affidavit when it comes down to this stuff is you.
Yes, I have wrote affidavits to the courts.
Okay, but you did put in emotional distress, duress, destroying motherhood, and all this stuff in that?
Yes, this was with my daughter and my granddaughter, and my granddaughter was in the hands of the father for only 7 days, and she was abused, and she was also neglected. She also ended up with an upper respiratory infection, which needed a nebulizer, and it was never picked up from the pharmacy, and the pharmacy had called them 4 times. And so at this point, my mother had taken my daughter and my granddaughter to an abuse specialist, and she was founded for an abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, every night, I have to live with this and know that my granddaughter was never taken care of, and all the bruises and everything. Mm-hmm. And at this point, we haven't seen my granddaughter since 2013.
Have you filed the criminal charges on these men and women?
There was a police report made.
I didn't ask that.
The judges.
The police
I think
report
you're
is not criminal charges. The police reports are to cover up for the system.
No, the only police reports that were written were by my daughter, and they were put into the courts. Unfortunately, the in-laws had a grandfather who was...
Yeah, we got that point, but that's not what I'm asking. Did you yourself file the criminal charges on these men and women?
No, I had filed complaints with the Judicial Inquiry Board.
Right. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from, is that, and this is where we do, is you have to learn how to file the criminal charges on the criminals who are directly involved. A complaint is basically a whiner. So they don't deal with complaints. They only deal with an average of 4 to 10% complaints across the country, because otherwise it's considered whining.
Right. They were. I was ignored with that. I went to every place possible and filed affidavits. I filed reports.
Right, but see, you never filed any criminal charges on the men and women that committed the crimes.
No, not on the father of the child, and he did end up with custody, which intimidated my daughter, and she had to return to that family, and now I can't even see my daughter, and she hasn't even seen our family for it's going to be 3 years in November. So, you know, Eugene's been there for me. He's real special to me, and he's been trying to help in this situation so we could bring the kids home, you know, to make us all whole again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm hoping for. Eugene's very smart, and he did win his case, and we support each other, you know, as much as we possibly can.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that you need to file the criminal charges on these men and women.
Well, see,
if you don't file them,
Ed, they'll be fraud upon the court, Ed, because they didn't actually do the right thing.
No, we know that.
But
I comprehend that, but I'm saying if you don't file the other stuff, it doesn't coincide with the court, because if you just go with fraud on the court, we already know it's fraud on the court, but you want the criminal charges because then they can't run and hide, and then that confirms fraud on the court. Yeah. Now you've proven it by the criminal actions.
Now, how do you file criminal charges, Ed?
Right.
How do you do that?
Well,
when they do that myself.
When they kidnap your child, that's called, what is that? Kidnapping a child? That's a federal crime. When they embezzle money from you, ask me a question, let me finish, please. So when it goes to the budgetary structure, that's stealing public funds for their employment. They sit there and take funding for the federal money that Clinton put in place. So they take that money and pocket the money. So that's embezzlement, fraud, extortion. So you write the criminal charges. It's like if you get pulled over and they take your automobile. All right, you file grand theft auto on the tow company, and you file grand theft auto on the police officer. And the tow company's liable, and they go, well, the tow company's just the middleman. No, he sat there and stole that car and conspired with the police officer to take your property.
You file it with the local district attorney or the courts?
You file it with the federal government, the clerk of the court, and I actually have the forms.
Well,
there you go.
Right. Unfortunately, my daughter was intimidated by the judge, and he.
It doesn't matter. So your daughter does have nothing to do with your filing.
No, I know. He had stated to her he wouldn't let her see her daughter, and he said.
Oh yeah, intimidation factors.
Right, and he said if your mother or your family does anything on your behalf, I'll hold you accountable.
I've been there. I've been through those court cases. We never ended up in court. The kids were brought back home, and the judges and administrators resigned or quit their job and left. They weren't going to go to jail, but the kid was returned. So if they're going to threaten and intimidate you, you do it by their way, or their administrator rules back to them. Yep. It's a chess game. It's really what it comes down to is a chess game, and they play the chess game. So you got to realize that they're playing with the king and knight, going after you for their own personal gain, financial structures, like every king in England has done for centuries. You know, and until after the Banking Act in this country, because prior to the Banking Act, if you would have done something like what they did today, you know, the guy would, a man or woman would come up and shoot you, and everybody said, hey, they deserve it. That's what they got. Justice was served. There was no court.
Common law.
You know, well, actually, common law, and if you get into common law where people don't get, that's where I don't like to use common law structures, because common law allows the judge to decide of the decision that is best for the community is what he sees fit.
Right, okay.
Okay, and I know this because I have the common law structures with the judges. I've even got the Supreme Court case from even Judge Roberts stating that.
You know what, Ed? We went through 7 attorneys, and they intimidated every one of them until they took all our money. And,
well, that's what attorneys do.
And
that is what attorneys do. I hate to say it.
He has a record, and he has custody of the child, so she had to go back, and she's not allowed to speak to our family anymore. And, I have a younger one, which is an aunt of my granddaughter, and she can't even see her sister or her niece.
No, I know that, but see, that needs to be filed that way. So that way, the caseworker involved that's not allowing the child to see his siblings. Well, that's emotional and mental distress. That needs to be filed on the caseworker on criminal charges.
They wrote that in the divorce, too, that they're not allowed to see our family.
Well, I don't care what they wrote down. I'm telling you how to win.
It's the effect. Yeah.
Do you want to win, or do you still want to just defend them?
No, I want to win, and I want to bring those children home to a safe environment.
But that's the point. And the other point is I can't tell anybody anything because we're not lawyers or attorneys. We're just assholes on the street. But, I mean, the thing is that you have to go after these men and women and file on them. And then when they run for public office again, you have to sit out there and make sure this is publicly known on the street corners. Get your friends and neighbors out there who are supporting you. Hey, we can't vote this judge in because of this, that, and the other thing, and make it known. And then they go, well, we're going to come after you for slander. Oh, no, you can't. Here's the proof. It's in your writing. You wrote the case, not I. So you have to turn their evidence against them.
Right. But, Ed, then you got to realize that all she's got to do is turn that case around that it was frauded, and the case turns around and it's vitiated. It goes back to the way it was. And
but she has to file that in the Supreme Court, but she still has to have charges.
That's what we're going to do in certain ways here now.
Okay.
Hey,
well,
Ed,
you realize...
if I'm hearing you,
go ahead.
Ed, if I'm hearing you correctly, the filing of the criminal charges is what proves the harm. That's your proof of harm.
Right. That's right. Because
when you have a harmed party, now you have...
Court, you can prove fraud on the court, but where's the harm in the court doing?
Who was harmed? So once you have a harmed party, now you can ask for a restitution or a restoration.
Right. And you have to put it under Title 18, 3771, Corpus Delicti. And if you don't use Corpus Delicti in your case, that's how they're able to throw 99% of the cases out because you did not claim to be the injured man or woman. You claim to be a corporation without quoting that.
Okay.
See, we're going to go on the benefit of the child because there's different circumstances to this case. In the cases that the mother was not acceptable and the son was not acceptable. So they gave it to the grandmother who she was not acceptable.
Right.
And Bianca should have been the one that is acceptable. So that's got to be turned over, that whole case. And
that has to be written up, filed, and served. That's how I won cases.
That's right, because she's the only one that should have got the child, and they kept her away from there, and they also
She's the only one that's lawful.
Right.
Bloodline to that child that could claim the property. Right. The child is property.
And that's what we're going to do. And the basic...
Under the law, anyway.
Yeah, under the law. And basically, to this, too, is you got to realize that nobody should have got the kid except her. The only one in that court that is not in fraud is the child. And she's not being represented right. So the grace should have been given right to the grandmother here, who was the one that should have had the child all the time. So we'll overturn that case and do that, and we can do that in the Supreme Court, too. So
ordered out of court.
See, we can get it done that way. There's ways to do this because everybody was guilty in that case. Everybody.
I wasn't even allowed. The judge had me removed from the court, so I couldn't be and watch the court case because
he did that to cover up the tracks.
Right. So I couldn't move forward, and I wouldn't know what to do. And we never had a day in court, even when it came to trial. And so none of our witnesses were capable of coming. The abuse specialist, because she was founded for abuse. And
they wouldn't let nobody in, Dad. You know what I'm saying? This court.
I know exactly what you mean. I've been there.
It's rigged. You know what I mean? So,
I know. I've been there. That's why I say. That's why the criminal charges. If you file the criminal charges, now you have evidence.
How do you file? How would you file the criminal charges? Like Goldie had asked you.
Okay, like the caseworker. You know, the criminal charges. She kidnapped and held her kids for ransom. She was involved in human trafficking. because that's what you made a living off. You got paid for the adoption of the child. When a child gets adopted out, the caseworker gets $7,500 per case.
No, the baby wasn't adopted out.
Yes, it was. It went to the father.
Oh, right, the father.
You got to look at the system, not what you think.
Okay.
See, this is the problem with so many people. They look at the system and they still justify these people's actions when they're criminal. You're not there to justify their actions.
That money came from the federal government, then, is what you're saying, Ed?
The federal government and the state, yes.
Which is straight from taxpayers, apparently.
Well, actually, technically, when you pay taxes, it goes to the Queen of England and the Vatican. Tax money doesn't stay here.
Okay. Well, then it still came out of public funds.
It came out of public funds. That's the correct wording.
So the trafficking and then profiting by way of public funds, and then there's harm if you file the criminal charges, so now you have all the basis for the crime.
Right.
Man.
Now you have the evidence that you could prove in court what they did instead of fraud upon the court being hearsay evidence. Because you have to prove the fraud of the court.
Correct.
And if you don't prove it, it's hearsay evidence.
That's true. Man. Even if you're the party. Right.
That's the whole point. That's where I try to get people to step out of the movie and watch the production, because when you start stepping out and you start doing it right, they start panicking. I mean, they're panicking right now. I just served the cities and counties because the sheriffs want to charge me their time to do all this research, like $5,000, $10,000. And so I sent an email back to them and say, how do you expect me to pay for it? I haven't got an email back. I want them to put in writing or email to me, we want it by, check, or we want it by electronic transfer or something like that, because I've got the state and federal law says electronic transferring and all that applies to banks and public employees. It does not apply to you and I. It's a federal crime.
Right.
Am I back on the line?
Yeah, you're still on the line. You never left.
Oh, no, I got disconnected.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think someone threw me off. So at this point, Eugene, maybe we could tell Eugene how we can move forward with these criminal charges.
Yeah, I'll get from Ed what he's saying, but there's a lot of ways that we can get Truities too. But
right, Eugene is right too. Go ahead, Eugene.
See, there's a lot of ways we can get Truities with the fraud, and we got to speak with them on what's going on here, because you can't get justice in this court that you're in, because it's already been a crooked court when someone has called up and told them to do what they got to do. So that whole course is based on fraud. So basically, we'll get that fraud and the evidence, because the call alone, the idea of the nebulizer, the child not being taken care of, not being treated right, not being taken care of by a doctor, and this here and being abused, that should have been overturned immediately. But right now, we're fighting a system in Chicago like we're fighting here. Once we get on this with this and get her taped and get stuff the thing, we will show the fraud. See, that's the key, and they know we'll do this, because basically it wasn't supposed to be given to the other grandparent, because the grandparent was in prejudice twice not to get the kid. The only one that she got was this, so she was kept out of the courtroom so she couldn't testify. So when we get back in, I got this figured out, and I already got plans on how to do this and get this done with that and with the fraud. See, because she can prove the fraud, and once we get our hands on the tapes and anything that's missing from that case, then it vitiates the case. Like, in other words, the same thing as using Rule 11 again.
Right. No, we're on the same page, and it all comes out to bringing out all of the circumstances.
But I don't want to keep it too high class for the people, because the people out there may not understand everything you have to do. So you have to go around here, grab the fraud, show the fraud, show what they've done, overturn that case, and bring back the kids. And basically, I don't think they're going to want to go for that once they know there's fraud up again, once we bring this up in the court.
Yeah, but you can't bring an end to that court or that state court. It has to go federally only.
Right. That's right. And it's got to go federally. And once it's fraud, it is federal then.
Right.
So once
and then you have to have an injured party. Otherwise, where's the crime?
Right, and the injured party would be the grandmother and the child now.
That's where the criminal charges come in. I think that's what Ed's saying.
Right, exactly, because that's the bloodline.
Yeah,
Eugene, right. I'm the maternal grandmother.
Right, and so the bloodline has authority, and that's where people don't get it in the courts. Why do you think that when people go to these courts and they try to go after in other countries, and the bloodline always wins. Doesn't matter if you're a poor man or woman, the bloodline wins in the countries.
See, but like what she didn't explain too, because I guess she's a little bit nervous in that, is the one that was the Bush woman who was supposed to be taking care of the kid, actually got in there and was doing it pro bono. But at the end, the judge says, "Well, let's give you $50,000 because I feel like." That's wrong too, Ed.
Yeah, I know, because that's a crime. That's called a buy-off.
I got that crime already set up.
That was with the GAL. The guardian ad litem.
It's all a crime now.
Right.
Well, you know, they all work for DHS. The guardian ad litem is not for the people.
Right,
so then again, when we go into the file, we go into her taking the money. Now, you know where the money goes. We won't know where it goes. And the point is, once we got that, we got them for a crime, we got them for everything. So we're going to see what they want to do now about making anybody whole or doing the right thing. See, that's they're going to go through hell with this case if they have to take it to court, because they did not think of the child at all. The child is the only one there that hadn't got no protection.
That's right.
See, that's the point. See, once they knocked out the mother, once they knocked out the other people, well, who was supposed to take that child but this one here, but their fix was in. So since the fix was in, you know what I mean, Tim? That violates the case.
I think the really important takeaway to get from what Ed's saying is that when a social worker comes in your home, even if you let them through the door, and they walk out with your child and they claim they have the legal right to, and you're uninformed and you allow them to do that, it doesn't mean they have not committed a crime. And
That's right.
calling it what it is. It's trafficking. They're trafficking in your child. And if you that was the initial offense.
Yeah,
so you go all the way back to that, and you charge them with trafficking because because you were uninformed or you had a weak moment and you let them walk away with that child, and it got to a court and they tried to make it official, doesn't mean you have to sit as a victim and allow them to do it because they still committed the crime.
Right.
Not only that, besides committing a crime, they intimidated you by having armed men or women there that are telling you if you step in their way, they're going to shoot you.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I would venture to say, I don't know what the numbers are, but from anecdotal stories that I've heard, I would say 50 to 60% of the time, they put these children right back with the abusers.
They do.
For sure.
You just can't justify that. There's no legal justification for that.
No, there is. It's called funding, counseling, because they know that because people go to counseling now. They don't deal with their own responsibilities. So I need a counselor to handle this. So it is financial, economically for everybody involved.
Well,
you're right, Ed.
Well, it's a racket, is what you're saying, Ed. It's a racket.
You're right, Ed, and so are you, Tim. And you know what? Just to bring to your attention, the paternal grandmother, when she went to court, she went to go try to get guardianship after the baby was abused. And the judge downtown, she stated, she goes, I know what's going on up there in that other court. And she says, absolutely not. Motion denied. And the mother, the grandmother, the paternal grandmother wrote in her papers that she didn't feel that her son was a safe environment for her granddaughter, and she wanted guardianship. And then the son, when he wrote a response to that, because he thought they had it in the bag down there because of the judge up here, and he agreed with her that he was not the proper and fit person for the child.
And the court ignored it.
Right, and the judge downtown, she says, absolutely not. Motion denied. That's where Eugene was correct. She was denied twice. She was denied downtown.
Yeah, but the judge, when the motion is denied, has to write a summary and clearly state why. And if there's nothing written, that's the crime, because that's administrative rules that they have to define the circumstances.
But Ed, now
Correct.
we got to think
so
about
that applies to Eugene's case as well. Yeah, we have several instances of that as well.
The files now. If it's not in the files and it's supposed to be there, where's it at? That makes her the winner right now.
Well, no, I know that, but the other point is that's why you do a Freedom of Information Act on DHS to get the file. Right. And if they don't give you a file because of your bloodline, then you have a case there. They don't want you to know this stuff.
Well, we want to get them back as fast as we can. I think they're going to be helping to the rock and a hard place, and it's going to be hard for them not to give them back. That's going to be a Ed, with this. It'll be a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
There again, and don't forget, we're going on a child's behalf. And the child
yes, but the only one that has lawful authority is the bloodline. Anybody else could back up the authority, but the lawful bloodline is the one that has to file the circumstances.
Right. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue doing stuff like that. She's already made some charges and made some signs here and there where to go, and we're going to leave it here and see where we're going to get done with this.
Right.
Basically, they're going to be between a rock and a hard place in both places.
That's what you want. That's the whole point.
That's the key, because you got to go on their terms and beat their own rules, and then when they come to the real rules, they're beaten anyway.
Right.
So
anyhow, guys, I've got to cut it off tonight because I told somebody I wouldn't go this long because they're not feeling good tonight. So we'll join next Saturday again this week. We can keep communications. We can stay on the phone after we shut the program down because the lines could be open. We can still talk to each other after the producer shuts everything down. So we can still talk and throw some stuff out. But I want to give the final word to Tim and Eugene, and then I'll close.
Well, if you want me to say...
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you, Ed, for having me on so I could let all the parents out there to let them know not to give up on their children and grandchildren and keep fighting for them. And
the other thing is when you're writing these court cases, don't bring the Bible into it.
No,
don't say I'm a Christian, because you bring the Bible and the religious part into that structure. They automatically go against it because Article 1 court is religion.
And you know that you're supposed to demand justice, Ed.
Right, no, that's and not religion. Religion is not justice.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to demand justice here in the case. But see, I already see how they did to her and looked at the case and watched the fraud. So I know where it's at. You know what I mean? And what's doing it here? So basically, we're going to run with that. Because like I said, when we see the Supreme Court, and it's us against them, you're going to find out if they're standing in fraud or they're going to do the right thing. Right, Tim?
Yeah.
They ain't got no choice here now.
Well, I'd love to be on again and be able to talk more about the children and so you guys know a little bit more about the case and what's going on out here, and especially with DCFS, too.
And which state are you in?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois as well.
Okay.
But
I was glad that they charged that cop with murder who shot that woman out there.
Right.
Well, I know because I talked to the people out there and filed the charges on the cop as a public employee. And they freaked out going, you can't do this and you can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. Because it's a public employee, it's a private contractor, and that can't be legal, and anybody could file on that.
Right. I'm in a suburb out, and Eugene always loves saying that.
Yeah, she's in a suburb, so I'll get what you got to say, and we'll put that up together, Ed. But I do have the fraud on this case, so basically, if the fraud's there, then we make the charges on them. There's nothing they can do. Yeah,
exactly.
Just like in our situation, they can't do nothing either. So they're going to be between a rock and a hard place in about a week, right, Tim? So
sooner if we can help it.
Sooner if we can help.
I mean, they're there now. They're just they're getting a moment's relief, I guess.
Yeah. See, so we're ready here. We're just getting they're getting relief from looking at this from after Labor Day. You know what I mean, Ed?
Yeah, I know.
We're there and we're ready to push.
They're having their holiday. They're having their hot dogs and their hamburgers, and then we're gonna hit them with it again. So I hope they enjoy their weekend.
Yeah, they got no protectors now because your clerks are your buffers. It's just like in The Godfather. You need a buffer between the Don and the hitman. So they got their buffers. Their buffers are the lawyers and the clerks. So we took the clerks out of this now. And basically she can handle it because she's the one who can represent the grandchild the best. Because they knocked out the other people. And with the fraud and them all being in the case, the only one not in the fraud is because they knocked her out is Bianca.
Have we let the producer go yet?
No, he hasn't ended the show yet. We're going to get ready to do that. And
I was going to say we should probably carry on in private conversation. Yeah.
But I was going to bring up one valid point that nobody's brought up. Nobody's filed on any of these judges or any of these attorneys. I just had the word and I had it just ran away from my house. Intent.
Ed, can I ask you a question before you go?
Yeah.
One of the attorneys now. Now, I know he did run because he's asked for $10,000 for a transcript, which was above what they could pay, and that was all BS. Now, what we can do, we can hold him for that, too, can't we?
Yes, you can.
That it is, and that blows the case, too, because the judge allowed that.
Right, because
right,
he
and the
asked
judge
for
can't
10
do
grand.
that.
He
And the other one is also
$10,000 for the appellate court.
Yeah, just for that one right there, you need to file a conflict of interest statement on them.
Right. So we're going to see what happens this week because, like Tim said, a lot of things could be shaken this week, right, Tim?
Right after this little weekend break.
Yeah.
So,
Tim,
I have to do the final so we
I'll put it that way.
Yeah, we're going to find out if there's a Supreme Court or not.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim. Do a closing, give some information out, and then we're going to close the show, and then we'll keep talking after the producer, wraps it up for all of us.
Okay, I got in late, so I don't really know what transpired before I came on, but I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, you were great, Ed.
Yeah, appreciate it. But the point is that so long as that we're getting more and more because, we got what we're doing. And, when people start working together on these things, this is how it's going to change the system because we, the people, have to change our system. It's our system.
See, when
our public employees are running wild, as they are doing today, and getting away with this because they are being allowed to by we, the people, because we're not educated and knowledge enough in what they call the system. And everybody keeps saying the system is so hard to understand, it's so difficult. And it's like, no, it is not difficult to comprehend the system. You've already been mentally told to be defeated already by the statements when people say that. And so when people sit there and they don't want to do the research, they don't want to study, or they want to go pray instead of reading the book of how to win their case and how to get their child back, or to defend their kids and learn how to file the correct paperwork and learn how to put these judges on notice. And that's one thing you always want to do is put them on notice. Every affidavit you always put as a public notice because the public is the court system. See, and everybody keeps saying, go to the private system, stay out of the public. And if you go to the private system and you don't file it publicly, they can go behind closed doors, attack you, and do a whole bunch of things because there's no evidence proving anything. It's all hearsay at that point because there's nothing to bring up in a court case because if it's not filed and if it's not in writing, it's hearsay and does not exist. Mm-hmm. And when people will go into court and say, well, I said this in court and I said that in court, and I said, so what does that matter? Well, I told them what the law is. I said, so what? And they go, well, why are you getting upset that way?
Hearsay bullshit.
That's right. Thank you. Because people don't get it. Because when the judges are doing this, they're setting it up so that way your case could be dismissed and covered up. They make money on this. It's all based on income for these elected and public servants. And once people really comprehend that that's all it's based on, that's the only way that's going to save these children. So with that, I would like to say we thank everybody joining us tonight and everybody who's listening later. Please go to new.org and trackers, and that is our website. We have lawful and legal information up there. We have a lot of good videos. If any of you have heard of Rob Ryder, I do recommend you go to his new video he just put out a couple days ago on the system. And he actually walks you through the entire system extremely well. I do recommend Rob Ryder and the stuff that he produces and brings out because Rob just put out one hell of a video, and we're going to have that put up on the the website. And I've got that already on the new.org and trackers Facebook, or the New Organ Trackers Facebook site. I do have it on the United States for America Elected and Public Employees site. I do have it on the Civil War 1866 Lawful Bloodline Americans. And we do have it on the Recall Kate Brown Oregon Governor site. And so it is important when you start researching this and watch that video of Rob Ryder, watch the movie Interstate 60, and you watch that video with Rob Ryder's video and you combine it with the movie, it really opens your eyes to the real court system, how it works compared to the way you think it does.
Well,
so with that, we'll see you tomorrow night, because tomorrow night we are going over the Second Amendment, and we're going to do the amendments for the next 25 weeks. And so that way people get to know it's the lawful ratified amendments and also, too, what is legally passed by the corporation, Incorporation of the United States, Inc. And so next Saturday night, we'll continue on this topic, and we'll bring in some more ideas, more structures, and the way to file your court cases. So until then, may the Great Spirit look over and bless you. May the Mother Earth feed and clothe you, and most of all, the Creator look over your children and yourselves. Thank you.
All participants are muted.